Hello and happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Welcome to Big Jeff's Football Insights. Every Thursday on the Big Ten Huddle, we are presented and brought to you by FanDuel, and we are part of the Believe Podcasting Network. I'm your host, as usual, Big Jeff McMichael, with my Big Ten football cap, my moniker there. This was pre-recorded actually on Wednesday afternoon, a little bit earlier than normal, due to Thanksgiving, of course. As always, please like the podcast for us and subscribe to the Big Ten Huddle. Our goal is to provide comprehensive coverage of an analysis of all the Big Ten teams in an unbiased way. Before I go to the agenda for this week, as usual, this will be my last update on my son's team. After the big upset that we had in round one, we did get beat in the second round of the Georgia Class 4A playoffs by a school called Lithonia. We lost 38-7 on Friday, so very disappointing. They're simply a better team than us. Two really good running backs, both had over 100 yards rushing. They rushed for over 300 yards total. So, we only completed a few passes. So my son didn't have any pass catches. He had a pass interference on him. He did play some wildcat quarterback. And if you have a parent with a kid who does that, it's both fun and nerve-wracking at the same time because they get pounded pretty good. If we would have won, I think it's an interesting note. The third round opponent would have been a team named Creekside. They are the number one team in the state of Georgia. Even though we're in the third highest class, they're actually ranked one across all classes. So would have been a rough game for sure. Would have been interesting to see it. Either way, though, it was a great season. First playoff win since 2017. Interestingly, the last team we had in 2017 that made the playoffs, our quarterback was none other than Max Brosmer, who, of course, played for Minnesota last year and I believe is on the Vikings roster this season. So that was his junior year. I won't be talking about it in the future. Some of you might be tired of that, but it's football related and it was a lot of fun. So the agenda for this week. So 3 items really here. I'm going to review my 2 week 13 picks, make some insights on the teams involved as I always do. Number 2, I'm going to provide insights on the 2 games I'm not predicting this week. So some pretty interesting things I'm going to talk about, how some of these teams are doing relative to their preseason FanDuel over/under win totals. I think that's pretty interesting. And then finally, third is, my week 14 Big Jeff's picks. I'll choose my game of the week and then my Lock City game. And just note, I will be not covering a special topic this week. So we'll, keep things a little bit shorter maybe, although my analysis of some of these games is a pretty good deep dive. Final reminder, all this information in analysis will be on in a detailed article on my website, bigjeffsfootball.com. That should be up by Thursday morning for that. So with that, let's talk about week 13. And I'm bringing up the results here. As you can see, I've highlighted in the colored rows the games I chose. I went 1-1 for the week, so it's really my third week in a row of going 1-1. I won my game of the week pick for USC versus Oregon, and then I lost my Lock City pick, which was Minnesota and Northwestern. So for the season, 29-27, a little over 500, not the greatest. Lock City, I take pride in that. I'm 6-4 now. Really hoping Northwestern would have pulled out the game and won by more than they did. But let's just do a quick review of those 2 games. I think it's pretty interesting. So what I got wrong, of course, was that Northwestern game. They were a 3.5-point favorite at home. I'd said erroneously that they were in the Lakefront small stadium. They're actually at Wrigley Field in that game. I'd projected a win of 24-17. But Northwestern won by 3. And of course, the spread was 3.5. So I just barely lost that one. They won 38-35, which is crazy. This game had the lowest over/under of any Big Ten game, 40.5 points. but the game actually turned into a shootout, which was very surprising. They combined for 73 points, almost doubling up the over-under. Statistically, the Wildcats dominated, outgaining the Gophers 525 yards to 323. And then time of possession, Northwestern 41 minutes to 19 for the Gophers. I like the Wildcats here because Minnesota's basically been terrible on the road. They came in this game 0-4, and they had lost those 4 games by an average of 30 points. That's just so crazy. Also, Minnesota, second worst offense in the Big Ten as of last week, and no ability to consistently run the ball. True to form, Minnesota ran for only 59 yards in this game, 3.5 yards a carry. So really, it depended on Drake Lindsey to have a big day, which he did. He threw for 264 yards, 4 TDs, 0 interceptions. So bodes well for the future for Minnesota fans, right? You have to really like that. Northwestern's offense, very effective, well-balanced. Preston Stone had probably his best game of the season. 25 of 30 for 305 yards and 2 TDs. That's important because he's been completing less than 60% of his passes. In today's game, that's really poor. Only 2 other games had he even thrown for more than 200 yards, and those were against in the non-conference against non-Power 4 teams, against Western Illinois and University of Louisiana Monroe. So this was truly a great performance, his best of the year. And then Northwestern's run game, excellent, 220 yards, led by running back Caleb Komolafe. Just so impressed with him. 129 yards, 5.9 yards a carry. And he's now the 4th leading rusher in the Big Ten. So key insights for Northwestern, this win makes them 6-5 and bowl eligible. I have to say, David Braun and this team done much better than I and many thought. Their FanDuel over-under for the year was 3.5 wins. They're already to 6 wins. So just a credit to that coaching staff. Credit to Zach Guggenheim. He had him going 6-6. I really didn't think that would be the case, so he really called that one well. I think the future is pretty bright under David Braun, have to say. For Minnesota, just continues to be perplexing how bad their rushing offense has been. So they rank last in the Big Ten. They're barely over 100 yards a game. That ranks 126th in the nation. There's only 134 teams, and last year they were 109th in the nation in rushing. So it's really just a shocker. I know I've talked about this before, but moving forward to support the young quarterback Lindsey, PJ Fleck's really going to get that run game going again. All right, what did I got right in week 13? So I got the Big Ten game of the week right. Oregon, 9.5-point favorite at home over USC. I projected the Ducks to cover and win by 14, 38-24. They ended up winning by 15. The final score 42-27. So I was pretty close in that score prediction. I didn't like the matchup at all for USC, just how great Oregon is in the trenches. And let's face it, USC not good enough up front to consistently win against the best teams in the Big Ten. USC did hang in there offensively. They had 382 yards to Oregon's 436. And in first downs, USC 23 to Oregon's 25. So hung in there through the passing game. They couldn't run the ball, though. 52 total yards for USC, 1.9 yards a carry. And that really supports how strong Oregon is playing up front. King Miller, 30 yards on 15 carries. That's just not going to get it done. Thankfully for SC, Jaden Mayava had a big game, 306 passing yards, 3 TDs. He did throw 2 interceptions. But he allowed Oregon, or USC, I should say, to keep it close. Oregon's offense was just way too balanced. 257 passing yards from Dante Moore, who was really good. And then the running game, 179 yards total. Noah Whittington's 104 yards rushing led the way. And what really hurt, though, USC at 14 all in the second quarter, Oregon had an 85-yard punt return by Malik Benson, just a really killer. And USC was also very undisciplined, 11 penalties for 130 yards. That's just not going to get it done. The Ducks also had 103 yards in penalties, so it really wasn't a clean game. But the loss, for the Trojans, takeaway, knocks them out of playoff contention. And while the Trojans are much improved for sure, that's the positive thing. This is year 4 under Lincoln Riley. He's one of the highest paid coaches in college football. So not even making the 12-team playoff field 2 years in a row is not meeting expectations. He's 34-17 overall at USC. They've only finished in the top 25 one of the 3 years. This year, it's looking pretty good for that, although if they lose to Washington, maybe they would bounce out of the top 25. They are moving in the right direction. My point is just, we expect more from Lincoln Riley after 4 years. For Oregon, supports what I and others have been saying. They're the most under-radar team in college football. They clearly are a team that could win a national championship. They're really one of a handful of teams, in my view, along in the Big Ten with Ohio State, obviously, and Indiana. People have been so focused on their lack of top 25 wins for Oregon, made much worse by that big win at Penn State in overtime. It still was a big win. At that time, Penn State still believed that they were going to do special things that year. So that win still shouldn't be downgraded, if you will. They've pretty much handily beaten the teams they played. They've only had that, 10-point home loss to Indiana is really the only blemish. So good thing for Big Ten fans is that Oregon team definitely a title contender. All right, let's bring up my next table here, which is the games for this week. And I'm going to get a sip of water here. We're going to talk about all these games. It's a full slate of games. All 18 teams are playing. I think there's only, 2 other times that happened during the season due to all the bye weeks. Might have been one other time. Can't remember that, but full slate of games, which is really awesome. My Big Ten game of the week, of course, is going to be the game, Ohio State at Michigan in the Green Row there. So we're definitely going to be talking about that. My Lock City pick is going to be Penn State giving 13.5 points to Rutgers. So I'll be talking about that in detail in the third section of the podcast. But let's talk about all these other games here a little bit. So first one on Friday afternoon, Iowa's favored by 5.5 points at Nebraska. Both teams are 7-4. Both teams per FanDuel started the year with a 7.5 win over under. So whoever wins gets the over, whoever loses is got the under. I just definitely think, the loser of this game at 7-5, I think that record will really feel like their season, frankly, was a pretty big disappointment, actually. Now, Iowa, even though they have the same record, much closer losses than Nebraska has. But I think both would feel equally bad finishing 7-5. On Friday night, also, we've got Indiana as a 28.5 point favorite at Purdue. Indiana can ensure their first 12-0 season, first ever Big Ten championship game appearance, and certainly they will clinch a 12-team playoff field. Although people haven't even given a thought, what if Purdue springs the upset? I mean, Indiana's still in, really. They just probably will blow their bye. They wouldn't get a bye if Purdue were to spring the huge upset. Indiana coming in the year, 8.5 was their FanDuel over-under win total. So they've blown that out of the water already with 11 wins. Purdue was 3.5. And so they've only had 2 wins, haven't won a Big Ten game in the last 2 years. So just, very disappointing season for Purdue, even though I think they're on the right track, even though they haven't gotten the win results. Next game, Oregon, 6.5 point favorite at Washington. A win makes them 11-1 and for sure will secure a spot in the playoff field. A win for Washington secures a 9-3 season for Jed Fish. So that will be looked at as a great season. Coming into the year, the FanDuel over-under for Washington was 7.5 wins. So they've already exceeded that, but certainly a win over the Ducks really would make this look like a great year for Washington. And potentially prevent their main rival from making the playoffs. Although that would depend on a lot of factors. Next game, it's the lowest over-under of all the Big Ten games, 37.5 points, barely less than the Iowa over-under. Minnesota is a 1.5 point favorite at home where they are unbeaten. They're 6-0 over suddenly surging Wisconsin, who has 2 ranked wins in the last 3 weeks for the Badgers and Luke Fickell. So again, Minnesota 6-0 at home. What's interesting about this game, I think, this is a matchup of the 2 worst offenses in the Big Ten. Minnesota ranks 17th in total offense. Wisconsin is last at 18th. So I call this the tribute to the old Big Ten West type of game here. USC, a huge 20.5 point favorite at home over UCLA, with the Trojans hoping to get to 9-3. Now they're FanDuel over under 7.5. We talked about that earlier. UCLA, another lost season. They just hope to get their 4th win. Just very disappointing for them. It's just been a crazy year for UCLA. Losing their first 4, shocked Penn State, then won 3 in a row, and now they're back to losing 4 games in a row. And frankly, they haven't even been competitive in those games, despite that 3-game winning streak looking really good. So it's really been a crazy season for UCLA. Next game, Michigan State hosts Maryland as a 3.5 point favorite. Both these teams have a combined Big Ten record of 1-15. I mean, that's just really ugly, especially when you think of the history of Michigan State. Good football school. Maryland 4-7. Their preseason over-under for FanDuel was 4.5, so a win would put them over that. Michigan State is at 3-8 right now. Their over-under was 5.5, so even if they win, they would be a game and a half below that over-under. So clearly, a disappointing season for Michigan State. Some teams in the Big Ten have gotten the the coaching, we're going to keep you and everything. They haven't done that with Michigan State. So I don't know if this is a game where it could be a game where Jonathan Smith needs to win this game to retain his job potentially. Then finally, Illinois, a 6.5 point home favorite over Northwestern. Illinois 7-4. Last year, though, and they are 7-5. That would be a really disappointing season for Illinois if they were to lose this game. They entered the year with the over-under of 8.5 wins for Illinois. And frankly, Brett Bielema was talking up them like they should be a top 10 team. And Illinois envisioned them as a playoff threat. So really, that loss last week at Wisconsin, really, really disappointing. So it's important for Illinois to right the ship and beat Northwestern. Now, Northwestern, we talked about them already, 6-5, secured a bowl. Their over-under win total is 3.5. So if Northwestern wins, they would be, with a 7-5 record, the most overachieving Big Ten team relative to the over-under to start the season. Slightly better than if Indiana beats Purdue even. So just really impressive for Northwestern there. Okay, so that was a quick review of all the games. Let's get into my 2 picks for the week. That is the final topic. So the game, Ohio State giving 9.5 points to Michigan. How do you write a concise background on this? You really can't. But let's just get into it. Michigan with a win over the number 1 team in the country. That gives them a 10-2 record. And I and many people believe if you beat the number 1 team, you got the best win in the country, and that should get you into the playoffs. And I really do think that will happen. Ohio State looking to go to the Big Ten title game and go undefeated to secure the number 1 seed and seeking a first round bye in the playoffs. Of course, they're 11-0 overall, 8-0 in the Big Ten. They have not been to the Big Ten championship game, though, since the 2020 season. That's the COVID season. Michigan's 9-2 overall, 7-1 in the Big Ten. They're on a 5-game winning streak. Remember, they had that loss to USC 31-13 where USC really mostly dominated them. Been playing really much better since then. Michigan can still make the Big Ten championship game if they beat the Buckeyes and Washington beats Oregon, or even if Purdue beats Indiana and Michigan wins, they should make the championship game. So a lot to play for here. And to add to it, everyone knows this, right? Michigan has won the last 4 meetings, each with its own storyline. I'm going to kind of cover that in a minute here. But Ryan Day, 1-4 overall versus Michigan. Had some people after losing last year talking about firing Ryan Day. It's been the one thing he hasn't done. Everything else he's done outstanding. This streak really has made Michigan fans gleeful, and I lived through this. So I'm an Indiana grad, but boyhood Ohio State fan. So I have 2 teams, Ohio State and Indiana in football. And they're so gleeful about this 4-game winning streak because how painful it was prior to that. Michigan fans don't forget, but people forget when Ohio State can't beat Michigan. They beat Michigan 15 out of 16 years. Before this 4-game losing streak, Ohio State had won 8 in a row. I mean, that's double this current losing streak, because you imagine how hurtful that was. And that's why, Michigan fans are just going to constantly talk about this, and rightfully so. It's a rivalry game, but don't forget, Ohio State had a degree of domination that made this 4-game winning streak looks like relatively nothing. It's just for Ohio State, it's painful given how good some of these teams have been for sure. So, Jim Tressel, Urban Meyer never lost to Michigan. Jim Harbaugh, I think, started out 0-5, in fact, against Ohio State. So it happens. And you even see it as good as Georgia and Kirby Smart is, and he's clearly the considered the number 1 college coach, and yet the record against Alabama, like 1-7 or something like this. So that's the anomaly of college football and how that can work. Unfortunately, in this game, injuries are going to be a major part of the storyline for both teams. And in college football, unfortunately, that also means a lot of speculation, because unlike NFL teams, they don't have to provide injury reports, and it leaves many in the dark. So going into this game, Justice Haynes did have a procedure for a lower leg injury. It's really expected he's going to miss this game. We believe that Jordan Marshall is probably going to miss this game, although I haven't seen anything definitive, but I'm expecting that. Max Bredesen is a captain, fullback, key player. He got hurt during the Maryland game. Lower leg injury, he's questionable. And then safety Rod Moore, who's had a series of injuries the last couple of years, but really has played well when he's played this season. He's questionable. In Ohio State, everyone's talking about Carnell Tate's been out many games, several weeks. He's questionable. Jeremiah Smith came out of the Purdue game 2 games ago and didn't play against Rutgers. These are difference-making players, just like those running backs for Michigan. They're difference-making players. These are huge injuries. So this is a really big deal. For Michigan, their offense is based on running the ball, and those running backs being hurt. And then for Ohio State, their passing game is what, is the engine to their offense. So pretty big deal there. ESPN SP Plus has Ohio State ranked number 1 in the nation. They're 6th ranked in offense, have the top ranked defense. And then Michigan, 22nd in SP Plus. They have the 45th rated SP Plus offense, 10th ranked defense. So good for sure. Just thought this was interesting. PFF, coming in the year, Michigan looked like had the easiest Big Ten schedule. It hasn't played out that way. Actually, Ohio State has the 44th toughest schedule in the nation to date. And that is easier than Michigan's schedule. So Michigan owns the 33rd toughest schedule in the nation. So neither has been a super hard schedule, although both, to their credit, have played tough out-of-conference opponents, which most of the other Big Ten teams have not done. So kudos to Michigan and Ohio State for that. So for the year, Ohio State against the spread, 9-1-1 against the spread. That's really amazing. The only non-cover was against Purdue in week 11. Michigan is 4-7 against the spread. They did cover versus Maryland this past week versus not covering 3 straight Big Ten games. Just an important note, too, weather could be a major factor here. Games expected to be a high of 30 degrees, 70% chance of snow in the afternoon, 10 to 15 mile per hour wind. So, all that in my mind favors Michigan, but that's always a factor here in this big game. As always, let's talk about reasons why teams can cover. So, why can Ohio State cover the 10.5-point spread? 3 reasons. Well, number one, Ohio State's defense. It's elite. It's the best in the nation statistically by a lot. It's loaded with future NFL talent, coached by a first-year defensive coordinator in Matt Patricia, who frankly has not called a bad game this year. And it's going to be difficult for Michigan to score a lot of points against that defense. That's really the first reason. So just, it's really crazy to think Ohio State had the number one defense in the nation last year. They had 8 players leave for the NFL, in essence, leaving 3 players left. And yet here they are again, number one in the nation in defense. And so let's go through a few numbers, which are pretty crazy. Scoring defense, number one, giving up 7.6 points a game. They've only given up 84 points total on the year. Next closest team actually is San Diego State, giving up 11.6 a game. Total defense, Ohio State, number one in the nation, giving up 207 yards a game. I mean, that's crazy as an average. Toledo Rockets are number 2 at 241 yards a game. Passing defense, number one in the nation, again for the Buckeyes, 127 yards a game. Interestingly, the 2 and 3 teams in the nation are Nebraska and Oregon. So credit to them. Rushing defense, Ohio State number 2 in the nation, give up 80 yards per game. Only team better is Texas Tech, who give up 72 yards per game. Ohio State giving up 2.7 yards per carry only. That's 4th in the nation. And they've only given up 4 rushing TDs on the year. That's tied for 2nd in the nation. So just statistically, that's just crazy numbers. Add to that, you got difference-making players, true unicorn players, I'd call them. Caleb Downs, anchor the defense, off-the-charts football intelligence, rated as the 2nd best draft-eligible player by Pro Football Focus. Arval Reese, ranked the 4th best player by Pro Football Focus, and then fellow linebacker Sonny Styles, number 19 by PFF. So just like star-studded players playing well too. Statistically, they've done really well. In the interior, PFF has the 47th ranked player that's draft eligible, defensive tackle Caden McDonald. He's going to be really a key because Michigan likes to run the ball and they run it well. So just the defense is the reason to like Ohio State. Number 2, Ohio State's offense, clearly better than Michigan's. They're led by a quarterback who's much more accurate, playing like one of the best quarterbacks in the nation to one of the best skilled player groups in the country. And that gives them an edge in potential to score points versus Michigan. So, just a few stats. Ohio State, 3rd in the Big Ten in scoring, about 38 points a game. Michigan averages 29, so that's about 9 points less than Ohio State. Ohio State, 7th in Big Ten in rushing, 170 yards a game. Passing is where they thrive, though. 2nd in the Big Ten next to USC, average 270 yards per game. Julian Sayin, potential Heisman candidate, uncanny accuracy and pocket presence. It's helped him complete almost 80% of his passes, 27 touchdowns, 4 interceptions only. He's rated by ESPN's quarterback passer rating metric as the best in the country, just barely ahead of Indiana's Fernando Mendoza. And maybe more impressive, and this speaks to Sayin's pocket presence and Ohio State's strong pass blocking offensive line, only been sacked 6 times on the year. That's pretty crazy. And then the big time weapons, Jeremiah Smith. Many consider him, if you ask some people, they'd say Jeremiah Smith should win the Heisman. He's just the best player out there all the time, and shouldn't it go to the best player? I'm not saying I think that's the case. I understand stats matter too. And he's got good stats for sure. Carnell Tate, projected 1st round pick. Tight end Max Clare, projected probably a 2nd round pick next year. So Ohio State has the weapons clearly. And then Bryce Underwood, contrast that. He's been solid as a true freshman. I think he's been good as you could expect. It's not like Michigan has supplied with him great weapons to throw to. He's only completed 62% of his passes, 9 TDs for 5 interceptions. So pretty underwhelming. But again, I'm not piling on Underwood. I think he's about where he should be. It's just hard for a first-year starter to really do extremely well. I think his running ability in this game, that's a wild card threat here. He has 322 yards on the year. I can see them really leveraging that running ability much more in an important game like this. The number 3 reason to like Ohio State, Ryan Day's mindset will be better. He's likely learned the lesson that winning this game is more than trying to outrush and out-tough your opponent, but moving the ball down the field in the way that suits what's worked for you throughout the year. So, play to your strengths. And in this case, it's clearly the passing game for Ohio State. And so they need to lean into that. And I think they will. Now, the weather could be a factor in that. So that's another, major thing to watch here. But there's little doubt, Michigan is in Ryan Day and Ohio State's heads, especially with last year's loss, which was very inexplicable. Each one of these games has had its own unique thing in the reason why they've lost. I guess the silver lining, of course, last year, that loss did galvanize the team and really caused them to play much more aggressively in the playoffs. They went 4 straight wins, all double digits. And who knows, if they would have beat Penn State and if their field goal kicker would have done his job and just kicked, 30-something yards field goal correctly, Ohio State would have pulled it out. You never know. They might not have went on to win the national title because I think they learned so much from that loss, as you often do. And really, each of these games unique. 2021, I thought, that was the C.J. Stroud year where Ohio State had that amazing receiver core. Michigan, I just think, was the better team. Ohio State had one of their worst defenses in a decade. And I think, the 42-27 loss was just kudos to Michigan. They were the better team. 2022 in Columbus, that was the C.J. Stroud where he was in his last year there. And I just think, early on, Ohio State was in control. Defensive coordinator Jim Knowles just ran some aggressive blitzes that really weren't needed. And it created some huge long touchdown runs for Michigan that completely changed the dynamic of the game. So I blame that second loss completely on Jim Knowles and think things would have been a lot different if he wouldn't have done that. 2023, that was a classic game in Ann Arbor. J.J. McCarthy in his, second full-time year starting, just a close, 30-24 win for Michigan. I think 2 teams that were pretty equal, but Michigan was clearly better because J.J. McCarthy was clearly better than first-year starter Kyle McCord for Ohio State. Not to say he was a bad quarterback, but they had the big quarterback advantage, and that's the reason why Michigan won. And then last year, right, we all know that, running into the teeth of the Michigan defense when you had maybe the best defensive lineman that Michigan has ever had in Mason Graham. Why would you do that? Other than maybe Will Howard seemed off in that game. He really did. So I can't explain it. But with a national championship now, Ryan Day, my point is he's more free to play. We're going to play our game. And if it's not good enough, that sucks. But we're going to play our game and not Michigan's game. And I think that will happen. So why take points with Michigan? I have 3 reasons. Michigan's defense still really good. If you look at their the PFF numbers, they don't have a single starter on defense who's really a weak link. They're more than capable of holding down that Ohio State offense, especially with the weather, and keeping this a close game. So, a strong young defense. The defensive line is especially strong. I think that might be the strength of the unit. Left defensive end, senior Derek Moore, he ranks 19th among all 909 defensive ends, according to PFF. So just really highly rated and really thrives in the pass rush. And he's going to be going up against the right side of the Ohio State offensive line, which is really the one and only weak area for Ohio State. So Ohio State fans know this well. Right guard Tegra Shabola really struggled this year. Of 676 offensive guards per Pro Football Focus, Shabola ranks up 499th. That's bad for a team looking to win a national championship. That is clearly a weak link. on that right side. Right tackle Philip Daniels for Ohio State ranks better, but he's had some games this year where he's really struggled. So I think, that gives some good, strong hope for Michigan. Strong defensive line going against that weaker right-hand side for Ohio State. Overall, Michigan's defense ranks 5th in the Big Ten in total defense, 303 yards per game. The weaker link for sure is the pass defense. That ranks just 11th in the Big Ten. They give up 209 per game. But it really magnifies the importance of the status of those star receivers for Ohio State for sure, because Michigan pass defense is not what they're super good at. Number 2, why I like Michigan and 10.5 points. We've talked about this. They clearly have the psychological edge over Ohio State based on recent history. There's going to be a raucous crowd, and there's a good chance Ohio State plays tight. They've done it before for sure, so that gives you hope. And, 2 of the 4 winning streak wins was simply Michigan being better than Ohio State. And 2 of them, though, has been Ohio State just playing poorly overall. So there's that dynamic in that game that Ohio State could just play way under it than how they usually do. And if that happens, easily Michigan could cover or win the game. And then the third factor to like Michigan, mentioned this already, the cold weather and potential for snow favors run-oriented attacks for sure. I know Ohio State's run offense is looking better, but I think Michigan has the better run attack, even with their star running backs potentially been out. And Ohio State wants to pass the ball. If it's pretty windy and everything, you just don't know how Julian Sayin is going to be in that type of environment. And I think Michigan couldn't have hoped for better weather in this one, to be frank. I really believe this too. I think Michigan is built best to beat Ohio State with their run-oriented team. The fact that they always play this game in late November where weather is a role. Ohio State is better built to win national championships, a more wide-open offense, an offense that can score a lot of points. They can come from behind if they have to. And an offense where in the playoffs, you're tending to go to get warmer weather environments where a more wide open offense can thrive. The other thing, Michigan's offensive line been playing much better as the season progressed. All 5 line starters well above the average per PFF for their position groups. So that's why some reasons like Michigan. So what's my call here? Given the history of this game, I do think 10.5 points sounds like a lot with the weather too. I do like, how Ohio State's been playing 9-1-1 against the spread is impressive. Ultimately, it's going to come down to, I just think this defense for Ohio State is too elite not to allow them to win the game. So I'm going to go with the Wolverines covering the spread, but the Buckeyes winning the game. So I'm going to go Ohio State 24, Michigan 17. That would come in as the under there. I give that a confidence of medium in this game. All right, let me get a drink. Cover our second game and final topic here. The Lock City pick of the week for Big Jeff. Penn State, a 13.5 point favorite against Rutgers. Per FanDuel, over-under of 56.5. This is a battle of 2 5-win teams. Both teams are 5-6. And the winner of this game needs to win to become bowl eligible. So Penn State 2-6 in the Big Ten, 5-6 overall. They actually have a 2-game winning streak for interim coach Terry Smith after losing 6 in a row. They're easily playing their best football of the year, including last week, really in the surprising game, thumping Nebraska 37-10, really dominating Nebraska. Rutgers 5-6 overall, 2-6 in the Big Ten as well, coming off a pretty bad 42-9 loss to Ohio State. But before that game, they had actually won 2 of 3. They had beaten Purdue and Maryland. Pro Football Focus, just out of interest, Penn State strength of schedule to date, 30th in the nation. Rutgers, 11th toughest schedule. So very tough schedule for sure for Rutgers. Penn State, when you think about them, they've had to play some really tough teams on their schedule. Rutgers, 3 of the 6 losses for Penn State have been against number 1 Ohio State, number 2 Indiana by 3, and number 6 Oregon by 6. So that's been a pretty brutal stretch for them. Rutgers lost to Ohio State and Oregon, but they didn't have to play Indiana. And think about Penn State's losses to UCLA by 5, Northwestern by 1, at Iowa by 1. The only loss that wasn't close was Ohio State losing by 24. But those 5 other losses for Penn State, a combined 16 points. So really about 3 points per game. They've lost 5 games by a field goal, basically. And so, boy, they were close to still having a really solid season. And it's why ESPN SP Plus has Penn State ranked 17th in the nation, despite being under 500. Rutgers, on the other hand, with the same record, is ranked by SP Plus as 72nd in the nation. What a difference. Year to date, so that the statistics really like Penn State. Against the spread, Penn State 4-7 for the year, Rutgers 5-6, so both not very good. Let's get into the reasons why to like Penn State. I have 3. Talked about it. Under Terry Smith, they're on a roll, playing like a different team, much closer to what we expected when they were ranked 2nd in the nation. Think about how close they were to beating Indiana. That touchdown in the back of the end zone to Omar Cooper Jr., almost like a semi-miracle play. And they're just playing so much more looser and confident under Terry Smith. Last 2 games, in addition to thumping Nebraska, beat Michigan State 28-10. And I think they're really motivated to get that 6th win and finish the season on a high note, given the disappointment of the early part of the season. Number 2 to like Penn State, under Smith, they've really leaned into that run game, and their best running back, Kaetron Allen, much more. They should have a great running game against Rutgers, because Rutgers has the Big Ten's worst rushing defense and worst overall Big Ten defense. So just going deeper on that, one of the biggest criticisms of Judge Franklin early in the season, why aren't you leaning into Kaetron Allen more? His stats early in the year was way better than Nicholas Singleton, who was really struggling for some reason early in the year. So once Smith took over as interim coach, he said he was going to lean on the run game more in Kaetron Allen, and that's exactly what he's done. In the last 5 games, Allen has carried on average 24 times a game, which has doubled his 12 carries a game in the first 6 games of the year. And in the last 2 games, Kaetron Allen, 181 yards and 160 yards a game, 5.7 yards per carry. So this is really working well. It's helped Penn State to control the clock, keep the defense off the field, who's playing better, by the way. And then given the offense an identity, right? They didn't have an identity early in the year. Now, Penn State's stats still aren't that great, despite the improved offense and running game. They're only 12th in the Big Ten in total offense, 9th in rushing offense, but still better. But, Rutgers giving up 202 yards per game in rushing. That's 127th in the nation. Just, you think of Greg Schiano wanting to run the ball and being tough against the run. So really perplexing and worrisome. They gave up 254 yards to Ohio State last week, which was an offense that wasn't exactly thriving in the run game. And then, like we talked about, Big Ten's worst defense in total yards, 2nd to last in scoring defense in the Big Ten, giving up 31 points a game. So I just think Penn State should not struggle to score in this game. Number 3 to like Penn State, the defense still extremely talented, playing much better, have defensive linemen who can put pressure on the quarterback, and that the key for Rutgers is their pass offense. So, Penn State's defense is geared to stop what Rutgers does best. So I'm going to go into the Rutgers passing stats later. But Penn State's pass defense ranks 6th in the Big Ten, give up only 170 yards a game. They have an experienced and talented secondary ranked really high. If you look at the PFF numbers for Penn State secondary, strong safety, Zakee Wheatley has the best ratings, and he should go pretty high in the draft. And then strong pass rushers, Right in, deny Dennis Sutton, ranks 5th among Big Ten defensive ends in PFF defensive stats. So all that, Penn State still has a defense that's talented and seems to be playing better. All right, why like Rutgers? I have 2 reasons. Number one, Rutgers passing game is clicking with that experienced quarterback. They have one of the best receiver core in the Big Ten for sure. And they can move the ball well with that offense, creating scoring opportunities. Rutgers has the 4th best passing offense in the Big Ten, 260 yards per game. Ethan Kaliakmanis, very experienced, career best 62% completion rate, 17 TDs, 7 interceptions, 3rd most passing yards in the Big Ten. So very capable. The one downside, though, of the Rutgers passing game, Kaliakmanis has been sacked 33 times this season. That's the most of any Big Ten starting quarterback. The only one coming close to that is Illinois' Luke Altmaier. He's been sacked a second worst in the Big Ten, if you will, 30 times. So in this one, the Rutgers offensive line is going to have to play one of their best games of the season. Because Kaliakmanis throwing to 3 top-level receivers, all 3 of them in the top 20 in the Big Ten. Really, 2 of them are the difference makers. Number 2 in Big Ten receiving, KJ Duff, 957 yards, 6 TDs. And then number 8 in the Big Ten, Ian Strong, 725 yards, 5 TDs. Also DT Sheffield, over 500 yards receiving in the top 20 in the Big Ten. So, Rutgers more than capable of moving the ball through the air. Second reason to like Rutgers with a pretty big 13.5 point spread. The run game has been better than the macro statistics would say. And then the run defense for Penn State is not their strength. So I think Rutgers has a chance here to move the ball on the ground. Penn State only 11th in the Big Ten in run defense. They yield 147 yards per game. Rutgers only 12th in Big Ten run offense, 136 yards per game, only 3.53 yards per carry. Not very good. So, Jeff, why are you saying Rutgers can move the ball on the ground? The stats are deceiving. Remember I said the 33 Big Ten leading sacks that Rutgers has given up? Well, college football, they count sacks as rush yards. So Kaliakmanis on the season officially has 86 carries for minus 25 yards. If you extract those numbers out, Rutgers average per carry jumps from 3.5 to 4.5 per carry. And if you look at their top running back, Antoine Raymond, quite productive, over 1,000 yards rushing on the season. He's 3rd in the Big Ten in total rushing, and he averages 4.9 yards a carry, 12 touchdowns. Rutgers offensive line individually ranks above average across all 5 offensive line positions with no glaring weakness. And again, the numbers point to Penn State's defensive line being better against the pass than against the run. So those 2 things give Rutgers hope here. So what's Big Jeff's call? I just feel the intangibles favor Penn State in this game. They're playing for Terry Smith. Many think, and they're pushing for Terry Smith to be the full-time head coach, not the interim at Penn State. So they're playing for something, right? They also want to change the tenor of the season. They have a legacy here to keep intact. They've won a ton of games, and they don't want to go out on a sour note and be the team that, opened the year number 2 in the nation and didn't even make a bowl game. So I think just Penn State has a lot to play for here and a lot of momentum. Also think Penn State matches up well. We talked about all the stats. Rutgers relying on the passing game, and that's kind of the strengths of the Nittany Lions defense. So I'm just going to Penn State riding the Kaetron Allen, rushing the last 2 games, building confidence. I see them pulling away, not just winning the game, but covering the spread. I see Penn State winning the game 37-20 over Rutgers. So I'll bring up the scores here and the final table here. You can see I have a high confidence, obviously, if it's my Lock City pick of the week. definitely see Penn State winning that game. So that's it for this week. Again, I will post my supporting article by Thursday morning. I just want to say thank you for supporting the Big Ten Huddle, and I wish everyone a very happy and healthy Thanksgiving, and good luck to your teams this week. Bye from now from Big Jeff.